Hey guys, welcome to another video. Apologies in advance. I've been just fighting a real nasty cold lately, so my voice is definitely going to sound pretty muffled in this video. But uh, we've been getting closer to tax season. We're basically in tax season right now, and it's been just making me look at my budget year over year, which I wanted to just really talk about and make a video on, just because when I was first starting out, especially in my career. I didn't really think it was important to track, the coffees that I would get, all of the meals I would go out and get. Like it's just the 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 little expenses that I was making ended up really compounding over time. Which I mean, again, that's a super elementary concept, but I think it's really important to kind of just baseline ourselves and talk about the things that I think have really helped me in budgeting way more effectively over time. So I've kind of broken this down into three different categories, and the first one is going to be super boring, um, but I promise there's going to be good nuggets in here, and that's what I like to say being one with tax law. So depending on what you guys are doing, I'd say most W-2 employees are typically just going to be, like I said, just getting their W-2 every year from their employer, sending it off to either TurboTax or their CPA, and that's pretty much it. They might get a couple 1099 forms from investment brokerage accounts where they might have some stock or they might have some different options. But the reason why I think this is important is because when I was in college, I had purchased a couple different stocks. I bought Netflix when it was really low, and I'm thankful I did. But I also bought a bunch of other quote unquote, moonshot stocks, or at least ones that I thought were going to go to the moon, and they just totally ended up being absolute failures. Which, back then, losing $100 wasn't going to be the end of the world, but it still hurt as a college student. So, um, anyways, I've been just kind of sitting on a lot of stocks like that have just been in the total dumpster for as long as I can remember. And all glory to God. Now I'm making some decent money at work that I'm getting hit pretty good with taxes these days. So I think now is a good time to basically sell off those stocks and count them as a loss against my income. And those would basically be designated as a loss. So if I lost if I was down $100 on when I purchased a certain stock at, I can claim that against my W-2 income. So if I owe $1,000 for my W-2, and I use that $100, then now I only owe $900. So basically, that loss is essentially being deducted from the amount of taxes that I owe every year. So that's just a little example, but there's certain things like that that you guys can use to your benefit with not necessarily getting around paying taxes, but the tax law is there for a reason, and like I said, it's very dry, but there's certain things that you can look for and you can filter out of. So if you're single person, no dependents, if you're in a certain tax bracket based on how much money you make, if you've got investments on the side. Again, this is all pretty elementary stuff, but knowing tax law is super helpful for budgeting, just because when you're tracking your expenses, your variable expenses, your fixed expenses, and then all of your income that's variable and fixed. So for example, fixed would be like your regular every 2 week salary, and then variable could be like a commission check, right? That's going to happen obviously when you make a sale, not every 2 weeks. So even though it gets paid out every 2 weeks, but yeah. Anyway, so that stuff's obviously super important to track. But it's also really important for once you get down to the end of the year that you also track potentially what losses you might have had. Um, or like for example, I'll give you another example. So I was looking at getting into a farm and purchasing some chickens and getting some eggs. And long story short, we ended up not doing chickens. We ended up getting emus and goats. Me and my business partner. And unfortunately, one of the emus we had to put down, it had a splayed leg. So you can count that as a loss against your taxes. And again, this is, the tax loss stuff is helpful for when you budget. That way, when you're figuring out how much money you have left over every month, knowing in the back of your mind that you're going to be able to recoup some of that at the end of the year or at the end of tax season is going to be nice. So again, getting familiar with tax law and seeing what will apply to you. I guarantee you guys, if you guys haven't looked into it at all, you guys can probably be saving yourselves a couple $100 at the lowest, I think, in terms of kind of what you qualify for. So that's the first category, is tax law. I think it's important to look into. The next thing I kind of talked a little bit about already, and that's tracking everything. So again, I track absolutely everything. I've got everything down to, I allow myself $40 worth of coffee every month. So that equates to like 2 cups of coffee from a coffee shop every week. That's just kind of a little treat for myself, but I track that. I track how much I give in donations to the church. I track, all of my silly expenses, like my Amazon Prime membership account and what month that hits in my year-to-year budget. I also track like my Game Pass account, which I dropped from 19.99 to $8 a month by doing 24.99 every 3 months. So I feel like I've gotten to a really good point where I know I don't look at my checkings account and wonder like without looking at the name. Like I look at the amount now and I'm like, oh, okay, that's probably for that, or that's probably for this. Like that's just kind of one thing I've been really really honing in on is figuring out and understanding, really where my money's going, right? You have to figure, and again, if it's something that's not bringing me that much value, then I'll just scrap it. So I got rid of Apple Music and just switched to Spotify because it's free. I don't really care to listen to like an exact song when it comes out. I'm trying to think of what else, but I've been doing a lot of cost saving measures, which is nice. Which again, that's the beauty of the budget, right? You guys are going to be able to see when you look back at your budget every couple of months of like, oh, okay, I'm spending this much in this membership and I haven't used it all year, so maybe I can can it, right? I switched to a cheaper VPN that actually ended up being better in terms of the servers that are around me. So like there's again certain things that I'm always looking at in terms of saving money, but also being more effective in just kind of my day to day with work and just kind of my personal life. So I can't stress tracking everything and how important that is. So I typically in my budget have it broken down into 4 categories. So 2 are income, 2 are expenses, and then it's just basically fixed expenses, variable expenses. So fixed expense would be like your rent every month. You know exactly what that's going to be and when it's going to hit. And then a variable expense could be like groceries. So that's just going to be an eyeball, or how much you're spending on water or utilities. So yeah, so technically those are fixed because you're paying those every month, but the actual amount is always going to change month over month. So yeah, so again, fixed, variable expenses, and then I do fixed and then variable income. So I already mentioned before, fixed income is just like if you're a salaried employee, you have the exact same amount that you get every 2 weeks, and then obviously if you get commissioned, if you're a salesperson, then you get uh, different levels of income depending on how much you sell, right? So that's kind of how I have everything structured in my own internal budget in Excel. And the last category, so again, tax law, super important, save yourself some money every year. And then obviously tracking everything. I mean, those are really, I think, the 2 most important things that come with budgeting. And then, I think 3 is what's important with budgeting is if you're just kind of in this total, you know, boring cycle of just constantly saving money and you feel like you're never really living life. I like to really benefit the most from my expenses. So, like, for example, my apartment has this pretty sweet sky deck amenity. So I've gone out and I've, done some work from there. It's a nice breeze. They have a couple cool countertops with bar stools. So I'll just go out there, and again, that's totally free. I don't feel like I have to buy a coffee there, like if I were to do that at a coffee shop. Plus, it's convenient. It's in my building. So those are just a couple examples. And again, just to recap, I think first of all, I think budgeting is incredibly important. I think if you just get into the mindset of tracking everything, and I don't mean to say like being a maniac and taking pictures of all your receipts and logging those, and you don't have to do that. But I mean, if you have a bank account, you'll be able to see how much you spend every month, and whittling it down to the memberships and the subscriptions that actually bring you value and aren't really breaking the bank. Because at the end of the day, budgeting is not only to save money, but it's to grow wealth, right? If you're just basically living to pay off all of your expenses, then you're never going to be growing your money to a point where if you have a family in the future, if you have kids, you're not going to be able to support for them. You're not going to be able to support for your wife. So again, being one with tax law, I think is super important. Save you guys money every year. If you look into it, I'm sure you guys will be able to save a couple $100 to a couple thousand even. Um, Track everything, be super disciplined and relentless when it comes to that. And then, like I said earlier, make sure that what you're spending money on brings you guys value and that you guys are able to squeeze the most out of whatever it is that you're spending your money on. Anyways, see you guys on the next one. Thanks.